Hello ladies and gentlemen, two things about this video. The first thing is that this copy of Sekiro was supplied to me by PlayAsia and I have to thank them a lot for that. If you want to do me a solid, down in the description you will find both a referral link and a coupon code. Use both and you'll be both doing me a favor and saving yourself $3 off your next order. Very good. The second thing is that this footage actually had some errors I didn't notice while in the middle of recording despite actively looking out for them, which was annoying. So if you see things like frame drops and the frame rate randomly getting cut in half, which I actually bring up in the commentary, yeah, that's what's causing that. It's not too bad, but yeah, it's just there and it's noticeable. The game runs absolutely fine, solid 60 for me otherwise. So yeah, there you go. Enjoy the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima and I'm here checking out Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Now, I gotta admit, I am playing this in post-commentary, as in I've already recorded this footage and now I'm just watching it back while I'm talking about the game, because, holy crap, I tried one earlier and it did not go well. I tried playing the game my usual way, where I talk about the game while I play it on video. Not a good idea with Sekiro. Not a good idea at all. So we're just going to be doing this way. I'm currently going through all the options, and eventually I'm going to run out of stuff to say, and I'm just going to let you watch the video. But for now, we're just going to go through all these options here. Key rebinding is nice. I am playing this on a PC with a i7 8700K and a 2080, so if I couldn't hit 1080p, 60 frames per second constantly, I'd be mad. And I would be very mad because I remember bloody Left Alive not being able to hit it. There are a lot of PC settings, including things like motion blur, which is the only thing I've got turned off, but everything else is on max. Some people are upset that the game is missing stuff along the lines of ultra widescreen, but personally I'm just annoyed by the fact that it's missing full screen windowed. Or borderless windowed, as it's called on some PCs, but yeah, for some reason that's just completely missing. I'm not entirely sure why. Oh well. So, I'm just going to take a second to let you look through all the different things you can do while you're at a rest point. Of course, resting revives enemies, but gives you all your healing potions back. In this case, they're called healing gourds. And you can also do things like get shinobi arts, Ashina arts, different kinds of arts. These are both passive skills, active skills, and just little things that are going on in the background, like being able to do stealth better, having your recovery items matter more, etc. You can buy them using skill points, you get XP from enemies, and that enemy, and if you get killed, you lose half of it. You also lose half your money that you also collect off enemies. You can also enhance your physical attributes when you have prayer beads, 4 of them. You usually get that from boss fights. Sometimes you find them as consumables. And you can also use memories from major bosses in order to increase your attack power. But anyway, here we go. I haven't actually played this area just yet. I have been around and had a look at some of the initial stuff, but for the most part, I don't know what's actually coming in this footage. So it's just going to go through and we'll just see what I can find. So Sekiro is interesting. It is a Hidetaka Miyazaki game. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And his legacy is, of course, Souls. Being Dark Souls, Dark Souls 3, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and now Sekiro. So very obviously this game has a lot of his influences. But strangely enough, one of the major influences this time is stealth. Stealth is kind of bizarre in a Souls game, but it does let you do things like sneak up on enemies and instantly kill them via death blows. Death blows are very important in this game because you need to do them a lot, especially against bosses, which we'll actually come to see later. We do also see some things like interactables in the world. I have no idea what that kite is meant for. I also think this video footage is a little bit off for some reason. I'm a little bit disappointed by that. My computer should be better than this. Nevertheless, items to find, people to kill, it's very Soulsy. A lot of people are going to try and tell you this is a spiritual successor to the Tenchu series, which FromSoft had some hand in, I believe. Or at least some people from FromSoft did at some point. But at the moment, no, it is it is a Souls game. It is through and through a Souls game, just with a few different things on top, like stealth and the ability to get around using a special grappling hook and a bunch of other things like that. And you'll get to see a fair few of them throughout this 55 minutes of footage. I'm just going to say right now that, yeah, it might take a little while to get to that stuff, but... well, I'm just going to keep talking anyway. So the combat in Sekiro is actually really interesting, and I'm going to call it, tentatively, the best of the Souls series by far. And there are multiple reasons for this. The reasons being that the combat in this game is much more interesting than your typical Souls game, because they've added some new sorts of combat features that make the game way more interesting. In most Souls games, you had the ability to attack, block, and dodge, and you'd have to combine all three of them against enemies that would basically just throw attacks at you. You'd have to either block them or dodge them and then attack back. It wasn't really that much of a in-depth system because there was really only one way to do things. Now, in Sekiro, there is more than one way to do things. You see, enemies and you now have two different stats. You have Vitality, which is your health, and you have Posture. Posture is increased by hitting attacks on enemies or by you getting hit, because Posture is actually not only a thing for you now, but you don't actually have Stamina, which is also an interesting compromise that we will come and talk about in a bit. But the idea is that you now have two bars. Now, you can either completely empty someone's vitality and kill them the normal way, or if you manage to block and parry enough of their attacks, again, parrying, we'll get to that in a second, if you manage to block and parry enough of their attacks, you'll be able to just kill them that way. You don't even have to worry about dealing damage. And this is a really interesting system because it gives you a lot more ways to go about combat. Do you want to focus on taking out their health? Or do you want to focus on taking out their posture? The one downside to this is that most enemies actually get their posture back really quickly in some cases, and the big way to keep them from getting their posture back so that you can actually do a posture kill on them is to do enough damage, as in take out about half of their health, maybe more. So it can be kind of disappointing trying to go for a posture kill and then realizing that their posture just recovers so quickly that you need to just basically step back and focus on dealing damage. But I still think that this is a good thing because it gives you a lot of ways to approach combat, because now even with their posture recovering at a certain rate, you can still make the effort to try and posture kill them instead of trying to worry about getting around their attacks and taking out their health. People, and to be fair, the game itself, people and the game will make you think that dodging isn't useful anymore. It is, it's just not as useful as it used to be. It doesn't have as many iframes, and it definitely is a little worse than before. You definitely get a lot less distance out of it. But you can actually dodge as many times as you like now, because there's no stamina. So you have the choice of dodging as much as you please, and parrying is also an option, because parrying is done by tapping the block button as soon as the attack hits you, and not 1 millisecond before or after. The timing window is really tight, and you need to learn how to parry good in this game. I did say dodge was useful, I didn't say you could rely on it the same way you could in the original Souls games and Bloodborne, because yeah, you really do need to learn to parry in this game, because parrying does a ton of posture damage, and it will also protect you from certain kinds of attacks. There are 3 kinds of attacks. There are thrusts, there are sweeps, and there are grabs. Thrusts and sweeps are parryable, but they aren't blockable. So if you don't block them with very specific timing, you still can't block them. And grabs are just unblockable in general. You have to get out of the way. Unfortunately, the game is a little bit of a dick in talking about this, because thrusting, sweeping, and grabbing are all displayed on screen with this same big red symbol, and you barely get enough time to actually watch the enemy determine if they're going to thrust, sweep, or grab, and you basically need to learn their moveset to know exactly what they're going to do. Kinda sucks, but nevertheless. The game you do need to worry about that, of course, but still, you still do have to learn enemy patterns, of course, but the game itself is actually pretty generous about it. It starts out being really difficult, like, don't get me wrong, you really do need to learn your parrying, but once you do, then the game will get really difficult again, and then you need to learn that, oh, I can effectively dodge and attack and parry all at the same time, and it makes for the most in-depth Souls combat that there has been since, well, I guess you could say Demon Souls. I mean, maybe Dark Souls. I mean, personally, I don't think Dark Souls is that deep of a combat system, especially when you're forcefully locked into, like, certain amounts of spells and stuff like that. It's just, it feels so... It's very simple to get your head around. It's just hard because you need to learn the enemy patterns. In this game, you have multiple different systems you have to deal with all at the same time, and that's what makes it the most interesting thing of all. Combine this with the fact that the game's got a lot of different ways of handling difficulty, and a lot of the enemies are actually designed around learning specific things. Like, there's one particular boss fight, which I'm not going to spoil completely, that's more or less just basically, can you parry really quickly 3 times in a row? You've won, more or less. And then there's ones which are like, you need to dodge as much as possible because parrying these attacks will be almost impossible, and his health comes back so quickly it's almost unbelievable. And then there's ones that make you combine all 3 together, getting in good attacks, firing off parries and good blocks. Even regular blocks are useful just because they can help you avoid some basic damage. And then just learning how to dodge effectively. Doing all 3 of these things is really satisfying too. And getting in that win on that asshole boss is just one of the best things imaginable. Now, they have also introduced some neat new toys to play around with in the form of the Shinobi tools. Now, the Shinobi tools are all really unique and fun things to play with. Like, for example, on the video right now, roughly, I'm showing off firecrackers, and you have a ton of these tools that you find throughout the game, and they are absolutely required in 1 or 2 situations, which is really annoying. Like, there are these wooden shield enemies that I've only seen twice so far in the 14 hours that I've been playing, and for whatever reason, they are only really defeatable if you stealth kill them or if you have the axe Shinobi tool, because the axe just goes right through their shields. And there are a couple of enemies like that, but not too much. The annoying thing is that you kind of need to find something that I actually completely missed in my first few hours. My friend told me about this old lady you have to go and find in order to actually go and, in order to actually get access to a bunch of those tools. And when I found some enemies with shields early on in the game, I was like, what the hell do you do about these guys? Turns out you had to go and get something that I completely utterly missed. But yeah, you get a ton of interesting tools. Like, you get the ability to throw out fire. You get the ability to use a hat as an umbrella, sorry, as a shield. You have the firecrackers, which let you throw out a stun pretty much anytime you like. Shurikens, which just let you throw things. And the consumable these come off of are really easy to get a hold of. Like, you can buy a full complement just by killing a few enemies and going back to the sculptor's idol, which is their bonfire, and you can just buy them straight out, which is great. I've mainly just been buying all my excess... I've just been dumping all my excess money. I'm just waiting, because I'm thinking this thing's going to come back to life, and it definitely is. And I was right. There's probably another way to kill this thing that I'm unaware of. But yeah, you get plenty of the consumable fuel to use in the game in order to play around with the gadgets. And you can also upgrade your gadgets to make them even more useful. Like, you can, for example, the basic shuriken only throws and hits once, but the first upgrade you get for it lets it throw and hit 3 times. And you're just finding materials all over the world to upgrade them with. And you do need these specific ones in order to actually upgrade down a certain tree, which I will show off later on in this video. But yeah, the tools are really fun to play with and give the combat another layer of depth, except for the couple of times where you need it to beat a certain few enemies, which is frustrating, but it doesn't happen too much, and most of the time it makes sense. My personal favorite combination is to try a bottle of oil and a flame vent on an enemy, because a lot of enemies are vulnerable to fire, so using that combination is actually really useful, and I used it to get past a really hard boss fight earlier. You do also, of course, have consumable items, things like candies that will improve your stats, pellets, and your healing gourd, which is your Estus flask, and a bunch of other things like that. Notably, they actually let you buy coin purses in this game, which will let you hold on to your money when you die, because again, you lose half your money and half your experience points towards your next skill point, which is kind of annoying because I didn't realize that you didn't lose all your skill points until I got confirmation on the internet that you could successfully die and not lose the 4 skill points you had saved up. Thanks, game. Would have liked to have known that ahead of time. But yes. The game does also have one more interesting mechanic, although it feels kind of pointless in the 14 hours that I've been playing outside just giving you an extra chance at life. So it's actually the resurrection system, and when you die, when you run out of health, you fall to the ground and you stay there for a while, and it turns into a bit of a fake death pill situation a la Metal Gear Solid 3, where you get to wait for a little bit and then resurrect when you want. Now, for the most part, you might think that this is actually a pretty cool idea to give you a little bit of an extra chance, and some people might think it makes the game easier. It really doesn't. There are a few things about it that really get in the way, like for example, when you resurrect, you're still open to attacks, so you can immediately die if an enemy decides to just come in and attack you right there and then. Secondly is that a bunch of enemies don't actually, like, buy the fact that you're dead. Some do, and it can be really useful against a particularly hard enemy combination that you're dealing with. That was my bottle going off. I apologize about that. Let me just release the pressure on that. There we go. But yeah, it is useful on some enemy groups. That's very loud. It is very useful on some enemy groups where you can just wait for them to walk away and then get back up and stealth kill them. But on pretty much every enemy where you would really want to do this, you can't. They're smart enough to know that you are going to eventually get back up. So it all feels kind of... It isn't entirely pointless, I'll give it that. And it's nice to get a little bit of extra health, and you can actually stretch out resurrections for a while, because you can actually get multiple resurrections. The name of the game is Shadows Die Twice, but if you play well enough, you can actually get more than one resurrection, so that you die more than twice. So I've actually got an item in my inventory that lets me get a 3rd resurrection. I just haven't found the character that can turn it into a 3rd resurrection yet. So now that I've died, I'd like to talk about one of the more annoying mechanics in this game, and that's Unseen Aid. Now, for those of you who know how NPCs work in Dark Souls, NPCs are basically like quest givers, shops and what have you, and sometimes they, in this game at least, they can get dragon rot when you die, and that means that you won't be able to talk to them to do things like go forward with their quest lines, and that also means that you'll also get less of a chance of Unseen Aid. But what is Unseen Aid? When you die, you get a certain percentage chance of not losing the XP and Sen, which is their money, that you were going to lose. However, I have to admit, it feels really strange to have this one mechanic out of everything that I've almost ever heard of in the Souls series, other than, like, you know, item drops, which I'll give them a pass on that one. It is an RPG after all. But it feels so weird to have something that vital tied behind luck. And I mean luck. My previous video where I did this, I was ready to complain that Unseen Aid almost never happened, and even when it did, it wasn't that useful. And then in that video, that failed take, which I'm probably never going to let you see because it was pretty embarrassing on my part, I got it 3 times when the percentage chance was at like 8 or 9%. And it made no bloody sense to me because it just seems to happen when... I forgot the way out the window here. It just seems to happen out of nowhere, and it annoyed me to no end because it wasn't anywhere near representative of the experience I'd had up to that point. But yes, it is still annoying because it still barely happens when you really need it to. And the weird thing is that it punishes you for multiple deaths by giving you less of a chance to get it, but it also infects your NPCs with a virus. That means they can't have their quests progressed or anything. I just jumped down there thinking there might actually be something down there, but no, I was wrong. I'm an idiot. Thankfully, with the amount of vertical traversing they make you do in this game, falls don't actually instant kill you this time. Wait, do I do it again? Please don't tell me I do it again. No, I don't. Thank God. I'm not that big of an idiot. Alright. But yeah, as I was saying, the majority of the time that you would want unseen aid is when you're fighting bosses. Because fighting bosses in this game is still really hard for multiple reasons, which I'll go over after I've talked about unseen aid. But the thing about unseen aid is that when it punishes you for multiple deaths, putting it in a game where you're going to be beating your head against a brick wall that is a boss and losing multiple times in an attempt to actually beat the boss is incredibly frustrating, because you never know how long you might be stuck on a boss for, and then your unseen aid will suddenly go from 30% to 8% because 6 people got infected with dragon rot simultaneously on one death. And I don't understand the mechanic at all. I can understand dragon rot. I can understand the idea of punishing people for dying, but making the other punishment for dying being literally just luck on whether or not you get to keep your shit after you die is bonkers. Especially in a Souls game, or in a Miyazaki game, as I've come to call them, because there is no good way to put Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro into one title that doesn't sound like you're having a stroke. But nevertheless, there are some other combat things I haven't gone over. Like, you can have combat arts, which are bound to LB and RB, which you can use to do special attacks and things. And some of these, there are also passive skills that will actively increase your moveset, like things like being able to use your shinobi tools in midair or after an attack, or things like that. But again, you earn skill points by defeating enemies, and then you use those skill points to unlock all that. It's actually a pretty neat system, and I can appreciate not having to run around with the whole sort of being a... with sort of trying to balance what you want to do in the game, especially when you're going through it for the first time. Like, imagine playing a Souls game for the first time, having a bunch of weapons and not effectively being able to use any of them excuse me, to determine if you actually like them or not. In this game, that's not a problem, because you can use all your shinobi tools as much as you damn well please in this one, and your one weapon is going to be your one weapon throughout the entire game. So, you know, that's all well and good. I do appreciate this. I appreciate it a lot, although it would have been nice to have, like, a spear, for example. But, I mean, you do get a spear as a shinobi tool, but you don't get many kinds of attacks with it, so there you go. So let's talk about boss fights. Boss fights in this game are just as difficult as they've ever been, if not harder, and I absolutely do have some footage of a boss fight later. I promise you this. I am just going back and fighting these dudes again because I felt bad about not fighting them properly the first time. But nevertheless, oh, there goes the frame rate on that. I wonder if that's my hard drive or if that was my recorder being a bit shit, but there you go. So, the boss fights are really hard. There's a lot of them this time around, actually. There are actually a ton of just mini-bosses that you can find out in the world that you need to kill twice, but the game actually rewards you if you get close to them without them noticing you. You only have to kill them once. So you can actually go in, get a stealth hit, and then only have to fight the boss with 50% of their health. There are some bosses that don't let you do this, but the ones that they do are a real lifesaver to do so well, because there is absolutely no reason you would not want to do this. But still, even killing some of these bosses once is a challenge, because they have made their movesets much quicker. Like, this feels like Bloodborne on steroids, more or less. Not to mention the fact that since blocking isn't as useful as it used to be, dodging isn't as useful as it used to be, and you have to parry a lot, not everything, but a lot, it makes learning all the bosses again a real chore. because you do have to learn what can be blocked, what can be parried, what would you be better off just dodging, and what would you be better off throwing down firecrackers in front of, because fuck dealing with that shit. He's already down to 1/10 of his health. I just want him to be dead right sodding now. But with that being said, this is the most satisfying game to kill a boss in ever. Like, I've played and beaten every boss in every Dark Souls game, not Demon Souls, and I've played almost every boss in Bloodborne, but there are like 1 or 2 that I didn't do because they were just so cryptic. But I have to say that even some of the mini bosses in this game have been infinitely more satisfying to beat than some of the bosses in Bloodborne and Dark Souls, because the whole back and forth they have going on with the parrying, the dodging, and the trying to get either their posture or their vitality down so you can go for the death blow is one of the most satisfying things I've played in ages. It is a massive dick, and there are a few reasons that really shouldn't be in there, but we'll get to them. But I have to say, seriously, some of these fights have been the absolute best fights imaginable. You can play some of them by Souls rules, which is dodge them as much as possible, parry everything that gets too close, and just go for attacks when you can. But it's still just absolutely fantastic to learn them, to get a really good parry combo in, to just wipe the floor with anything as you walk in, or just to barely get out a win by the skin of your teeth. Being able to do tons of parries back and forth, being able to sneak around the back of him and deal a decent shot, pulling off a really neat strategy like, again, throwing some oil, waiting for him to get close, and then timing your attack perfectly so that you can set him on fire. All of these little things are just that much more impressive in this game, and it's helped out by the increased speed, it's helped out by the increased reliance on parrying. I don't know why there are so many frames missing in this part of the video, I'm not sure why, but it's all just infinitely more satisfying in this game than it has been in pretty much any other game in this kind. With that said though, there are a few things that I do dislike about the game. I have said that Unseen Aid is a shitty mechanic, but let's go over some of the other things that I don't like. God damn, this area just must be really bad. Don't worry, it's not too long before I go to a different area, and hopefully they'll actually help out with the performance issues. But nevertheless, the lock-on camera is atrocious. Now, 90% of the time it works. But with how fast this game moves, and with how quickly an enemy can get behind you or next to you, the lock-on camera cannot keep up. And it's more than happy to break lock-on with a dude that is right next to you, about to attack you, and about to take off your last bit of health. It can be really frustrating to deal with that, because it means that some of the bosses are in the worst areas imaginable to fight them in. Here's an example. There's a boss that you have to fight to get into a certain area, and they are at the very beginning of the game. They're in the area that you literally wake up in at the start. And it's a tiny square room, and he moves like a mofo. He is much better to dodge instead of parry, just because he gets behind you so quickly that you can't even see when he's attacking you, and you just gotta hammer the left button and hope for the best, or you can just dodge him. But he gets behind you so quickly that your lock-on is incredibly likely to break. And it is a massively frustrating thing to deal with on bosses that work under the same principles. It can just be incredibly rage-worthy when they just sneak up behind you, throw out attacks, and you're done because your lock-on camera didn't keep up. I also do have a problem with some of the patterns of the enemies, because some of the bosses can swing in and attack you twice, right? We'll just say, for example, they have an attack that will attack you twice. Then they also have an attack chain that starts out exactly the same, but they hit you something like 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 or 9 times. Yes, that is a thing. So when they come in and attack you, it can be almost impossible to tell sometimes whether they're going to do the 2 attacks, the 3 attacks, the 5 attacks, or the 9 attacks. And you're not going to know. So you might think, oh, he did his 2 attacks, I'm safe to actually attack now. No siree, Bob. They will just come in and just continue hitting you, and there goes 75% of your health bar. That can be really frustrating to deal with. And I kind of hate that that's a thing, but generally you just learn to assume that the parries are going to be coming thick and fast, and there'll probably be another hole for you to attack later on anyway in his attack pattern. That kind of sucks. What else have I got? Well, those are the major problems. I've already talked about Unseen Aid. The camera does still suck. And the... yeah. Those are pretty much the major problems that I've got. Another thing, I suppose, my frame rate's dropped to 30 here. I don't know if that's my video player or me, but that's a bad sign. I don't remember this happening while I was actually playing, so maybe it's just my hard drive not being able to play this at the right speed or whatever. No multiplayer at all. Entirely a single player experience, which is interesting. Personally, I appreciate it because it's nice not being invaded by motherfuckers every 5 seconds while playing this in launch week. At the same time, I would have liked to have seen how this game actually worked while online. Like, imagine playing this in multiplayer. Although, to be fair, I really don't think it could. Like, we all know how bad From Software's online implementations for basically anything have been ever since bloody Demon's Souls. They cannot maintain decent performance no matter how hard they try. It is almost depressing. The amount of times I've tried to play Dark Souls online and basically given up is kind of atrocious, just purely because of things like ghost backstabs, swinging right through enemies, and just the sort of general bullshit of having to deal with, you know, the sort of bullshit of having to deal with that sort of netcode. Although it would have been nice to call in some help in some cases, but, you know, at least in this way, they have to make it so that you have to be able to beat the bosses by yourself, and you can't rely on help coming in from anywhere else, which is nice. You can upgrade your stats, everything from... I'm just gonna pause the video real quick and then just restart it. No, it does look like that it's just the video in general, but anyway. I actually go back to the hub world here just to show it off a bit, show off all the upgrades and all that. Yeah, I don't remember the game looking like this. I'm gonna have to check this video file before I put this up, but yeah. I go around and talk to the merchant, I go and have a look at the box that's supposed to apparently contain items that you can't get anymore, but that doesn't really help much, because I haven't actually found anything in that box yet. I talk to the lady and increase my healing capacity, and I go and talk to the guy who can upgrade my shinobi tools. But yeah, one other thing that I've found that is kind of a pain with this game is, unless you're going back and grinding out earlier areas for XP, which isn't the greatest of ideas later on, but if you're doing that, it's worth noting that it feels like you're not really getting that much better attack-wise. Now, in the case of your health, it's very visibly getting longer, and you are able to take a few extra hits, but then enemies get stronger. So everything starts kind of feeling like you're not really making any progress whatsoever, and it can get kind of depressing trying to go about it that way, because you end up in this situation where you get an upgrade and then you immediately go on to the next area and everyone's stronger, so it feels like you haven't gone anywhere. That can be kind of a downside in a game like this where they're very specifically timing handing out upgrades. What else do I really have to say about it? I mean, I've only been playing on the Japanese dub, which I'm absolutely fine with. It sounds absolutely fine. It's a Japanese game. Set in Japan, made by Japanese people. You're probably going to want the Japanese stuff by default, although from what I've heard of the English stuff is absolutely fine. Don't buy it on console, by the way, because as far as I've heard, it can barely hit 30 frames. As I said, I have been playing on this on PC, and I have hit a solid 60 frames. Pretty much the entire time, which is why this video is so weird. It appears to have cut back down to 30 for me, but yeah, despite what you might think from this video, the game itself runs absolutely fine on PC if your hardware is good enough, although, again, I'm not entirely sure about this. I have seen some things like, people are complaining that the frame rate isn't uncapped, it's locked to 60, but frankly, I'm fine with this. It's dark, it's From Software. They are known for making their games based around a certain frame rate, but then again, maybe the uncapped frame rate doesn't really break things too much. It has been modded into the PC version as far as I'm aware. Would be weird playing this at 144 frames a second. What else do I have to say? It looks beautiful. It absolutely does look beautiful. It is a really nice looking game, and they've done a great job with making it look good. The soundtrack is not my favorite in the series, though. Not that much in the way of really notable stuff, I've noticed. Do I have anything else? I guess not. Who would have thought? Well, I made it 35 minutes, so I might as well summarize my thinkings of the game so far after 14 hours. If that does give you an idea. I would have given up the game so much sooner if I didn't like it. Trust me on that one. It's the hardest Souls game there's been so far, but it's also the most mechanically deep. It's the most diverse in playstyles and boss approaches, despite the fact there's only one weapon. I really enjoy the shinobi tools. The getting around with the grappling hook isn't the best thing in the world, but you know, it's nice that it's there, I suppose, and you can turn it into something slightly interesting. And what else do I really have to say about it? Outside of a few things like the general just wombo comboing of bosses, combined with the fact that sometimes they can pull out a 2-hit or a 9-hit combo, which are almost identical in the beginning, so it's kind of hard to tell. And things like the camera still not being the best, because, you know, it wouldn't be a FromSoft game if they didn't have an absolutely broken camera. But yeah, I'm still enjoying the hell out of it. And if you are a fan of Dark Souls and you can deal with the fact that the majority of the attacks that you will be needing to block are ones that you will need to parry via tapping at the right time instead of just holding the button and hoping for the best. If you can deal with that, then yeah, I would fully recommend you go for Sekiro, because it is one of the most satisfying games in years, and that includes beating out games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. I know Dark Souls is actually at an end now, because Dark Souls 3 was supposed to be the last game in a trilogy, but if they end up doing Dark Souls 4, I'll be interested to see what tricks make it from this game into that one. So, Arch in the Depths is going to be very interesting if my bloody capture didn't absolutely break. But yeah, in this area, there will be an actual proper boss fight, which I almost just got shot by. So, yes. I'm just going to shut up and let you watch that. I'm gonna keep it secret whether or not I actually beat him. So, yeah. Place your bets. Leave your bet in the comments and see if you can actually guess correctly whether or not I actually beat the boss. This has been Blue Maxima. I really do enjoy Sekiro despite its faults, and I would recommend you pick it up if you actually have the timing for this sort of thing. And I will see you all next time.